30 years ago, we never would have imagined being here talking about this. We went from childhood games to energetic alignment. By doing the work, we created better versions of ourselves. Join us, two women sharing their intimate journal entries on their path to consciousness. Get in here, get in here, get in here.
Intuition. My intuitions have always been warnings. It was the queasiness in my stomach or the shortness of breath that always told me what was coming next was a big pile of disappointment. And while I'm grateful for the heads up, I also know it kept me stuck in fear. I was afraid that disappointment would become this constant broken record in my life. And naturally, I stopped listening to it. I gave up on it until I didn't. My third eye intuition opened me up to a new awareness system, one where I listened, discerned, and then watched how things unfolded instead of predicting its course. I allowed, accepted, and surrendered to my mystical instincts. I paid attention to how the warnings made me feel. And instead of choosing fear, I chose freedom. I paid attention to how the warnings made me feel. And instead of choosing fear, I chose freedom.
Let me never miss a message. Let my insight and intuition be clear and concise. This was just one mantra I recited over and over to improve my intuition. Trusting your intuition takes time. Mine started as random thoughts that I dismissed. But as I got closer with myself, fell deeper in love with myself, it became easier to distinguish my inner voice versus that of a higher power. What I would have dismissed before, I now tuned into. It dictated my decision making and thought process. Here's what I wish someone would have told me. Getting quiet helps the intuitive voice grow. Intuition can sound like the voice in your head. It can come from other people, songs, signs, and sequences. It usually almost always is your first thought and often sounds crazy. Intuition that seeks to keep you out of trouble usually starts as a whisper, and the longer ignored, the louder or more volatile the messages and experiences can get. Practice your intuition by guessing what someone might say, the color of a shirt someone might wear. Pay close attention to your dreams and keep a journal of your hunches, random thoughts, and notice how you feel when you receive them. Thank your higher power, consciousness, God, universe, when your intuition pays off, and ask for more of the same. And finally, and most importantly, trust yourself and your intuition to guide you accordingly. Welcome to Get In Here, the podcast. This is episode 4, all about intuition. And so let's jump right in, Keila, because you said a couple things that I really appreciated in yours. And it really was how you ended it, and that you were choosing to freedom.
Because I feel like freedom is a calmness. And for me, my intuition is very calm, right? I feel like knowing that's what we probably need to talk about today, like knowing the difference between an intuition or your ego, something else that is kind of like at odds with that voice inside of you. Because you also made a good point, that voice inside of you can sound crazy. It may sound crazy, but it's still very calming and it's still very soothing. It's like, and that's what I know about my intuition. My soul is very calm. It's not going to say anything to scare me, to kind of, put fear inside of me. It'll tell me something as a warning now, and then it'll lay out the steps or kind of, give me the path to what I need to do next in a very calm way, right? Almost like I'm not trying to scare you, but these are the things that we need to do, right? For example, for me, it was like doing my will, right? There was sometimes I was like, oh my God, I might go out here on the road and just never come back. And I don't have a will. And that's frantic and that's panic. And I'm like shaking, right? But your intuition be like, you know what? I think today, just run over to the bank, get the notary to sign the will, uh, and you'll be okay. It's a very calm voice. So I think that's what the people need to know first, is how to know when it's your intuition versus your ego.
Well, so now so when I was sitting here listening to you, I was thinking that the reason that your voice sounds calm, your intuition sounds calm, is because you have been obedient to it. So that's why
Right.
I believe it has been calm, because I will say in the beginning, I don't so maybe my intuition did come out as calm, but because I wasn't obedient, for me, it felt like when I was first tapping into, my intuition was butterflies, nervousness,
Yeah.
anxiousness, or like just feeling like something was off, or like feeling like the energy wasn't right, but always kind of like assuming it was me and not something else, right? And so I think as I became more aware and obedient of my intuition, it then became calmer and an easier message. And it was like I was saying in my journal entry, I think because when you're not tapped into your intuition and you are missing those cues and
Mhm.
those little messages, the messages become louder, stronger, and
Mhm.
sometimes more volatile in experiences. And I know that in my own life, when I have known that I probably shouldn't do something,
Yeah.
but did it anyway, and then had to reap the
Yeah.
results of that, which were often sometimes painful and hurtful or traumatic or whatever the case may be. And it was because I hadn't tapped into my own intuition or who I am,
Right. And you're
my
right.
own.
It does become louder when you know you're ready. Like when your soul knows you're ready to start listening again, because we both brought up a good point about there were there was a time I just stopped listening to an inner voice in me, right? Or
Mhm.
you said you had to kind of give up on it because we didn't know what it was. And so now that I feel like I know what it is, it's because my soul is like, okay, you're ready. Let me start getting louder. Let me come, and play my voice a little bit louder than that voice that she is used to, which is fear and all of that. Let me just turn up the volume just a little bit louder on you, right?
Yeah. But I do think if someone is like, okay, they're talking about intuition, where do I start? Like, how do I even build my intuition? And I think the first step to that really is being able to get quiet. I'm not saying
Hmm.
that you have to meditate, because people hear meditation and think like, oh, no, I'm out. I can't
Yeah.
do it. My mind is never quiet enough. And so I would start with the idea of just getting quiet. Can you sit quiet for 10 minutes undisturbed? Put your phone away, TV off, distractions. You need to do it in a place and at a time that you know that you'd be free from distractions, and just get quiet. And I think it is observing the thoughts that come
Yeah.
into your mind, just observing, letting them go and then come, as they come. But I will say that in the beginning, I think someone had to tell me this. Your first thought is usually almost always intuitive.
Hmm.
And so you think like, oh, and I have an example. So I was taking my daughter to soccer practice,
Yeah.
and we were running a little bit late. And the reasoning mind would have told me to take the highway because it would have just been quicker. We don't have to do with the local roads. And something overwhelmingly said, go local. And I was thinking, like, why would I go local? Like, that just doesn't make any sense. We're going to be late. Don't want to do that. But I had gotten into the habit of trying to listen to my intuitive thought. So I was like, okay, that was my first thought. As soon as I like walked out the door, it was like, go local. And I was like,
Hmm.
all right, we're going to go local. Lo and behold, I only find out later that there was like a major pileup on the highway that we likely would
Mm.
have been hopefully stuck behind and not in. But that is an instance where I came home and I was like, ooh, my intuition was telling me what to do, but it sounded like my own voice. And I
Mhm.
thought it was just a random thought. And that was one of the first times that I really like clued in and said, like, oh, okay, like that was actually a message that I received. I was obedient and was rewarded for it. And so
Yeah.
like that's why I always say, like, thank you, spirit or ancestors or whoever it is that you look to as your higher power, and say, thank you. I want more of that. So you're basically telling them, like, I got it. I want to
Mhm.
be able to hear it clearer next time.
Yeah. So in that example, right? Because for me, my brain would say, take the highway, bitch. That's where you need, you know what I'm saying? And for me, I think my brain would have taken over. But I think for you, when it told you to take the local streets, what did it sound like? Was it a calm voice? Was it a like warning, warning? Like what does
No,
it?
it wasn't. You're right. It wasn't a warning at all. It for me, I would have said it was a passing thought. It just was a passing thought. And
Yeah,
again, my own voice, my own inner voice. And I realize some people don't have an inner voice, so you might be like, what are you even talking about?
right.
But it came in my own head as my own thought. And I used to be, now this is the ego girl talking, because I used to also be like, things would come into my head and I'd be like, gosh, I'm brilliant. That was just a brilliant idea. And then as I like grew spiritually, I understood that like actually those were ideas from spirit. Those are
Yeah.
ideas from another realm that I was going to try to take full credit for.
Okay.
Um,
I don't think anything's wrong with that. As long as you know, like you're
no, girl, not
integrating
then. I didn't know then. I
it.
was saying
Okay.
I am brilliant. I'm a genius. I just thought of that out of nowhere, not realizing that it was quote unquote downloads that I was
Yeah.
receiving from another realm, that were used, that should be used as guidance and direction. And I think, oftentimes so many people suffer from anxiety, right? And
Mm.
anxiety is often the idea of like either being afraid of something in the future or being worried about something in the past affecting the future, essentially. And it's because we can't hear that clear voice that is telling us, that is helping us discern
Yeah.
exactly the moves or the next move that we should actually be making.
Right. Right. I had did a exercise and I was like, I want to share this exercise with everybody.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because I again, the first step is trying to understand who's talking, right? Like or how. And now I know it's more of like the feeling of it all too, like how this thought makes you feel. And so last night I was like, okay, just imagine yourself on the beach. I'm a water sign, so I love some water. So imagine yourself on the beach. You just close your eyes. You're laying there on your cabana, listening to the waves. You're kind of falling in and out of sleep sometimes, but you're laying there for hours with not a care in the world. Now, something may come over you, a voice may speak to you, and you may speak back, but everything is still and very calm. And then you awaken. You open your eyes and you look around and you notice you are the only person on this beach.
Mm,
And panic takes over. And you can't even find your phone. Uh-oh. And now you get mad because your butler has placed you at this cabana and he is nowhere to be found. And it is getting dark and you don't know how to get back to your villa. Those feelings, when you woke up, when you opened your eyes, those feelings of panic, that was no type of intuition. That was ego. That was fear. So
mm,
I had to learn how to tap into the feelings of it all. I knew that if I become panicked and I can't find anybody around me, nobody gonna help me, you are panicking. That's not a feeling of intuition. So I want everyone to just remember that exercise and start to tap into those feelings of, is this my ego or is this my intuition? If it feels calm and still, that is your intuition. Listen to it. Because let me tell you, when I had my eyes closed and I was just listening to that water, I wasn't worried about everybody around me getting up and leaving. I didn't even hear them. I wasn't worried about where my butler was at. It was his shift was over, baby. It was time for him to go home. That I wasn't worried about any of that, right? And that was so, I was free. That was what freedom felt like to me. And so that's how I know my intuition is very free flowing, very calm, very still. When she talks to me, it's going to be in a very calm nature. She is not going to get me all riled up, get me all panicked. So, understanding those feelings will help everyone to tap into their intuition, because I think for a lot of us, we just stopped listening to it because it was a lot of fear. It was a lot of anxiety. It was these things that we as I know now, didn't serve me, was just keeping me stuck, right? I talked about, like, my intuitions being warnings. They were warnings because it was like, panic warning, and I'm like, oh. But I knew if I kept doing that to myself, I would be stuck forever. And so I just had to get out of it. So I want everybody to remember that exercise, or they could come up with their own. You come up with your own exercise of what makes you feel calm, and place yourself in that moment. And then when you wake up, if you start to have all of these additional feelings that just feel yucky, right? Just feel like out of place. Like, this isn't how I felt 5 minutes ago. 5 minutes ago, I had no worries in the world. And a lot of that time, we can do that during meditation, right? A lot of that is just being calm, being still. And I think there's a Bible verse for my Bible people out there, is be still, my child.
Mhm.
And I feel like that was the first time we heard the description telling us how to tap into our intuition. That was the
Sure.
instructions, to be
Yeah.
still. And so if
Yeah.
we can all kind of do that, I think we can, start to listen to that voice inside of us a little bit more. It won't be so loud, it won't be so panicky. And I think maybe we could just change the world. Maybe.
Well, I want to take a step further from what you were saying, because again, I have to keep reminding myself that our listeners may be someone that is not at all familiar with intuition or how to step into it. So I
Right.
really want to make this tangible for them.
Yeah.
So exactly what you said, the exercise, what I love about it, I would add doing that exercise the minute you have a decision that you do not know how to solve. So you're like, hey, I could do it this way or that way. I don't know what the best way to do is. I would say go into that exercise, this
Yeah.
idea of put yourself in where your calming space is, wherever you feel best. And so for everyone, it'll be different, doesn't matter. Put yourself there until you have like, and I guess before you even go into this session of like this exercise, I would suggest asking the question and asking for the answer of like,
Yeah.
what should be my next step? Then go into that happy place or that calming place and just sit. And again, you can visualize whatever it is that you are that helps you remain calm or bring you calmness. And then see if there are any ideas that pop in your head. Because I will always say that when I ask for questions or when I ask for guidance in something, almost always I will get ideas of things to do. So it's
Mhm.
not necessarily the answer that I'm looking for, but it'll be like, hey, you should go to this grocery store. Well, that's not the grocery store I wanted to go to. I actually was going to go to this one because it's closer, but I had this thought to go to this one. I go to the other grocery store and I run into an old friend who I haven't seen in a long time, who in that conversation gives me the message to the answer that I was asking before I
Right.
went into this calm state. So that's why I say, like, use this idea because we are asking you to get in touch with your feelings, right? So when you can get calm and you can get quiet, you can start to recognize those feelings and ask those questions. But the real trick here is that you have to be obedient. You have to listen without judgment, without ridicule. And it said, like, again, I would say, why am I going to go to that grocery store when this one is closer? That doesn't make any sense. But had I not gone, I would not have ran into that friend who would not have given me the message that she didn't even know that she was delivering to me.
Right. Correct.
So obedience, I think, is a big one. And then there's something else that you said about like when we talk about like anxiety and like the worry and everything and the stress that we're under. And I always remember this one like quote, and it always takes me back that like there is only room for faith or fear.
Mm.
The two things cannot reside at the same time in the same place. So you're going to have to decide, I'm going to choose faith or I'm going to choose fear. And every decision you make after that is going to be operational in one of those two things,
Yeah.
faith or fear. And
Yeah.
so, out of faith, I think comes blessings and surprises. Out of fear, I think comes worry, anxiety, and more anxiousness. And so
Absolutely.
it is a choice that you have to make. And so getting quiet when you have a decision to make, asking for guidance, and then listening to it, and then acting on that guidance right away. And that's I think the big kicker, because I think oftentimes, and I said it in my letter, like intuition sometimes for me will sound crazy. Again, why go to that grocery store? Why take the local when you got to get somewhere quickly?
Yeah.
So it sounds crazy, but it is guidance. And so you have to just be faithful in listening to it and acting upon it.
Do you, because this is something I thought everybody did. I thought everybody talked to themselves. Do you talk to yourself?
I do. I do.
Yeah.
I talk to myself a lot, but I didn't realize that until recently. Not everyone does, and not everyone has an inner voice. In the
Yeah.
same way, not everyone can visualize things like here's an example. Okay, I'll say when I read a book, it's like the book is playing out in a movie in my head,
You
and that's what
picture
I'm
it.
watching.
Yes, you picture it.
But that's not the case for everyone. So for someone that can't picture it, I wonder if it is this exercise of just being quiet,
Hmm.
of just trying to observe any thoughts that come to your head. Like, so if you don't talk to yourself, which I actually think is really therapeutic to talk to
It
yourself.
is.
Um, but some people might label you. You
I
start
mean,
talking
now
to
look,
yourself too
I'm not
much.
out at the grocery store walking with my shopping cart talking to myself, unless I have my earbuds in and then they know I'm talking to somebody on the phone or something like
Right.
that. But no, this is, in your space, in your quiet space, or just around the house, even with the kids at home, and you can have conversations, mentally. It doesn't have to be out loud, right? But you have those conversations with yourself just to kind of tap in. I think that's also, how you can tap into your intuition. You're talking to yourself, you're hearing back your voice. It may be your spirit, it may be your brain, something like that, but at least you're trying to tap in. And along the way, spirit is going to start helping you, spirit is going to start guiding you, and then spirit is going to get louder, and it's going to kind of overtake either your voice or your brain or whatever, and it's going to take over. And so I think that's kind of key too, to kind of helping you, understand and discern whether or not it was you or your spirit, or your
Yeah.
intuition, as we're talking about it today. So talk to yourself a little bit more. I promise you, you're not crazy. You won't look crazy. It's normal. I think we need to normalize talking to ourselves. And yes, I know a lot of people go to therapy and they talk to someone, and that may help. But my therapy is talking to myself,
Yeah.
because now I know my intuition is helping me a little bit more, right? So maybe before you get to that place, you might need to speak to, a therapist or something. But now I know when I talk to myself, I'm asking my intuition, okay, this is you and I talking to each other, and I need your help today, or I need your help at this moment, or something like that. And I trust that conversation that I'm about to have is going to be filled with spirit, and I'm going to trust. So you brought it up earlier. Trust. I'm going to say it again. We got to trust, ourselves, and kind of derail all that other noise, just get rid of it, because I promise you, you have all the answers. Like you just said, you thought you was brilliant, baby. You thought you was a genius. And you absolutely are.
Right.
But
Right. Yeah.
you
No, no, no.
got to know that it's coming from a place that
Right.
got you there.
A wisdom and a yes, a
Yes,
higher power that can
humbleness,
teach you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because when we're planning these episodes each week, it feels like I end up getting an example that's perfect for this. And it happened to me this week. And I kind of laughed at myself and I was like, oh, this is an example that you can use of me not listening to my intuition.
Uh-oh.
So my children this weekend were at their father's house, and my daughter called and was like, "Hey, mom, I don't have my cleats. Can you drop off the cleats because I have a game?" And I was like, "Sure." and I'm getting ready to get in the car to get the cleats. And so she has indoor cleats and outdoor cleats. I can't really ever remember which is which, but like, so I was like, something was like, okay, let me grab the outdoor cleats. And then something said, grab both of them
Just
just in
grab
case.
both.
And I was like, no, I know which one she needs. Let me get them. I get to their dad's house. And of course, she's like, Mom, those are the outdoor cleats. I need the indoor cleats. And I was like, my intuition told me to take both of them. I did not listen. So now I got to double back and make a second trip to bring her these cleats. So it's just like funny again, because it sounds again, it can just be a random thought that you're like, oh, why? You know? But it made me laugh this week. And I was like, oh, I have a story to tell on the podcast. And then there is one other one I think that I have to tell because this story always like
give it to
throws
me. You
me.
always got some good ones.
So this was in college. This was before I was spiritual. And in college, I was religious. I was going to church every Sunday in college. I don't know how. How did that happen? But anyway, and my boyfriend at the time, we went to school in the mountains of North Carolina. And so we had drove down to Asheville, which I think was like a 45-minute drive. But the last 30 minutes of this trip when we were heading back to school is a long, windy highway, 2-lane mountain road. So like really windy, take your time, you got to be careful kind of thing. And we were getting onto this part of the highway and my boyfriend cut off I don't think he really cut him off, but like an 18-wheeler, right? So the 18-wheeler goes in front of us. We're now behind it. He is driving. My boyfriend at the time is driving a CRV. Do you remember those? They're like tiny, tiny cars, right? I loved this car. But anyway, we have, again, a 30-minute trek back to the school. And the 18-wheeler in front of us is pissed off. And he keeps telling us, go around, and like honking and going really slow. And my boyfriend was like, let's just go around. And I was like, do not go around this 18-wheeler. I was like, he's too upset. He has not let it go on. We're 15 minutes. I was like, he was like, yo, we're going to be on here forever. It's going to take us like an hour to get back to school waiting for this truck. And I was like, do not pass this truck. We ended up, this truck again was pissed off at us for this entire trip, honking, trying to get us to go around, going really slow. And I was like, don't do it. He finally gets off the exit before us. When he gets off, he pulls over, opens the truck, gets out of his cab and is holding a shotgun and like yelling at us. And I said to him, I told you not to go around that car. He was waiting. I was like, first of all, a little CRV versus 18-wheeler. He could easily said that we like hit him and he didn't. He could have smashed us into a pancake. So like that was one of the first times I remember my intuition. And for that, it came over me as fear. I had this anxious feeling and I was like, something is not right. Please do not pass this truck. And so I always remember that story and it just makes me think like, you kind of will get those, you hear those stories of like murder mysteries or you hear people being like, something just didn't feel right. And that like in some instances, fear actually is intuition, right? And I remember watching a episode of Oprah a long time ago and it was called The Gift of Fear. And he was talking about that, where people were like, sometimes your intuition is fear. And it does come across as like an alarm, like something is not right, pay attention. And it literally, he had stories of, it was one woman in particular, I will never forget the story. She was going to get on an elevator and did not like the looks of the person who was already on the elevator. And something said, do not get on the elevator. But her reasoning mind was like, well, that's silly. And I don't want to look stupid. So I'm going to get on. She got on and the man on the elevator ended up forcing his way into her apartment and did all these tragic things to her. But the point was, the fear in her said something's not right. Yeah. And that's what happens, when we don't listen. So yeah, sometimes it's calm. Sometimes it might be loud. Sometimes it might be fearful. But I promise you, if you start to get in touch with yourself,
Mhm.
get quiet and listen, you can build your intuitive bone and you can build a relationship with yourself so that you have an inner guidance and don't necessarily need someone else to help you make those decisions.
Yeah.
So, listen, I know I took over. I had all these little anecdotal stories, but I think those help
Those
sometimes
were
with
great.
people.
I loved them.
We do need to close this episode out, but before we go, because we
Yes.
always now are offering resources, I wrote down a few different things that I think could help.
Okay.
The first is the song. It's actually called Intuition by Sophia Rayne. It's actually a beautiful, beautiful song, but really listen to the lyrics because she says it very clearly about being more in touch with yourself. The book that I read, and I read this quite some time ago, and I probably should read it again. It's called The Source: The Secrets of the Universe, the Science of the Brain.
Mm.
So this is actually very helpful for people who like analytical or like have a science math brain that want to be like make it make sense. This actually can help your intuition make sense. And then the movie that I would choose for intuition is Moana. Because if you see Moana and if you haven't, please watch it just because and what you'll notice as a child, she knew she was called to the sea. And then she had intuitive guides along her way because she was destined for a path that only she could do. And there were people that
Yes.
showed up for her along that path. So, those are my three
I
resources
like
for
it.
you to tap into your own tuition. Thank you for listening. I know this is a little bit of a longer episode, but try it out, practice it for yourself. Any closing words, Keela?
Nope. I think you did great. Thank you.
All right. We love you guys,
Bye,
and we'll see you
guys.
next week. Bye. Until next time, get in here, get in here, get in here.